A Flash in the Dark, Chapter 22, Faced a Mask. Barry had had a hell of a day, canvassing the scene of the bombing and finding Bets and Susie through the VA file. Then there was Joe telling her to talk to Iris about her blog. Then the worst thing happened. Iris put her name on her blog. Cisco was still mad at her for blowing up the last suit, even though it had been completely accidental. Joe had yelled at her for not getting Iris to stop writing about it, so she was doing something crazy. She just hoped that Iris might listen to the streak instead of Barry. Also, maybe to suggest a new name, because the streak just sounded wrong. She'd left Bet in the capable hands of Dr. Wells and raced off in costume. She gently pushed the door to Jitters open, slipping inside without a sound. Something Oliver had tried to teach her. She wasn't so good at it at top speeds, though. "I'm sorry, we're closed." Iris didn't look up from where she was, gathering dirty mugs. Barry smiled slightly. She was kind of excited about Iris's reaction to her in costume. She'd keep her promise and wouldn't reveal her identity, but still, it wasn't every day that you met a hero. She decided on the spot to throw on some theatrics. She raced past Iris just fast enough to throw napkins flying around the room and blow her hair back. Iris jumped, and Barry held back her laugh. This was serious, even if the awe in her sister's eyes did wonders for her ego. She vibrated her vocal cords, modulating her voice so it was unrecognizable. "Iris West, I hear you've been writing about me." Barry made sure to stand so she was backlit, her face hidden in the shadows. Iris stuttered for a moment before she stepped tentatively forward. Barry matched her steps, going backward, careful to stay in shadow. It's you! You are real!" Iris glanced around and blushed lightly. Let me clean up," she said, stepping quickly over to the nearest table. Barry grinned and rushed around. To Iris, it must have seemed like a few seconds, but Barry managed to gather all the dirty dishes, pick up and take out the trash, and wash every dish in the place within the space of a breath. Iris stared around at the immaculate coffee shop. "Wow," Iris managed. Barry smiled from her spot by the door, the street light behind her casting her face in shadows. "Meet me on the roof. I'll even give you a head start," Barry teased. Iris grinned and raced off up the stairs. Barry counted to 3 before bolting up them herself. She hopped up onto the side of the roof and waited. It was another full minute before Iris arrived on the roof. Barry grinned, keeping her face in shadows as she spoke, feet dangling over the edge of the roof. "I need you to stop writing about me," Barry said, drawing her sister's attention. Iris looked up, shading her eyes against the bright glow of the city lights, as if that would help her see the woman in Red's face. "There are a lot of people who need someone like you right now. To just know you're out there. I have so many questions." Iris was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Barry felt a twinge of guilt knowing that she was keeping the truth from her sister. "Where are you from?" Iris stepped closer and Barry raced to the other side of the roof. She couldn't risk Iris recognizing her. "Around," Barry stated vaguely. Iris spun round, facing her again. "Who are you?" Iris asked. Barry grinned, shaking her head slightly. "If I told you that, it would kind of defeat the purpose of the mask," Barry pointed out. Iris stepped forward again, and Barry raced off once more, ending up on the other side of the roof again. Iris tried and failed to track her with her eyes. She was just too quick. "How can you do what you do?" Iris asked. Barry remained silent, walking along the side of the building. "You are a terrible interview," Iris huffed. Barry raced over to the corner of the roof nearer her sister. "There's more to this than you can understand. Trust me, please." "I need you to stop," Barry demanded. Iris turned to face her again, making no move to step forward this time, though. "Can you stop? Running into buildings and rescuing people before they even know you're there?" Iris shot back. Barry shook her head, the long ponytail that stuck through the back of her mask shaking slightly. "I don't do it for the glory," Barry stated. Iris inched forward, obviously hoping Barry wouldn't notice. She did, and raced back over to her original position on the roof, her legs dangling off of it. Iris huffed an exasperated sigh. You are worse than my sister when it comes to sitting still. Then she sighed again, choosing this time not to face the flash, not to let her tease the non-meta anymore. Look, a long time ago, when my best friend, my sister, was a kid, something horrible happened to her. Ever since then, she's been telling stories about this impossible thing. And people laughed at her, and shrinks analyzed her. She's been looking for an explanation ever since, and you are proof she's not crazy. But it's like she's lost her faith. She won't even talk about it anymore. She's lost, and I want to help her. But I need your help to do that, Iris admitted. Barry was floored. She had no idea that all this was because of her, more so than the fact that she kept putting on the suit. Iris was doing this, all of this, putting her name out there to help Barry. She was touched, honestly. For a moment, she remained sitting on the edge of the building, looking out over the city, away from her sister. She's lucky to have a sister like you. That doesn't change the fact that you're putting yourself in danger by doing this. You need to stop, Barry insisted. Iris was about to go off on a rant, but Barry wouldn't let her. She scooped her up and placed her carefully back in jitters before racing off again, back to Star Labs. Bet was sitting in the examination room as Caitlin took another blood sample. Barry leaned in the doorway, a slight grin on her face, still in her costume. Bet smiled at her. It was only a touch forced. Gotta say, the red looks good on you, especially when it's not about to explode, Bet said, nodding to the outfit. Barry laughed. Yeah, that is a plus. But at least Cisco forgave you. He's still mad at me when I get dirt on his suit, Barry teased. Bet laughed. Somehow, I don't think he'd look quite as nice in the suit. She mused. Cisco peeked around the corner, a tablet in his hands. Hey, I could rock that red leather. If I tried, he stated matter-of-factly. Barry laughed loudly as Bet raised an eyebrow at him. Not really your color. I'd say blue. And black, but like electric blue. Bet mused. Barry nodded and yawned lightly. Dr. Wells nodded to her. You should get some sleep, Barry, the doctor insisted. Barry shook her head. I'll be fine. I want to be there for Bet. Barry yawned. Bet's smile grew more genuine. It's all right, Barry. I'll be okay for one night here, she said, reaching out to pat Barry on the shoulder before thinking better of it. Caitlin nodded. Besides, it's just the basic medical stuff you went through when you first showed powers, Caitlin said, nodding to the tray of medical scanners and equipment. Barry groaned. Painfully boring stuff. No offense, Caitlin. The speedster admitted. Caitlin nodded. None taken, she assured. This I could get used to. Barry, you are so sweet, but you're obviously exhausted. I'll be here in the morning, I promise. Bet laughed. Barry nodded, racing off to change. Coming back moments later, Cisco fished something out of a mini-fridge that sat off to the side of the cortex. He tossed it to Barry, who grinned, unwrapping it. Bet raised an eyebrow. Barry grinned sheepishly. My speed might come with its downsides. I have what Caitlin calls a hypermetabolism. I have to consume around 10,000 calories a day. Barry unwrapped the bar and took a bite. With her mouth full, she continued. Cisco makes these high-calorie energy bars. They've basically got a third of what I need in a day. Helps me save on groceries. And he is a miracle worker. These ones taste like chocolate. Cisco blushed lightly, and Bet let out a genuine laugh. Are you always like this? The soldier asked. Barry, who had taken another bite, spoke again around a mouthful of food. Like what? Frickin' adorable. Bet snorted another chuckle. Barry blushed red as her suit as Caitlin and Cisco burst out laughing. Dr. Wells even cracked a smile. Barry swallowed her bite and scowled. Oh, come on, I'm 25. I should have lost the adorable marker around 16, she whined. Bet giggled, and Barry stuck her tongue out at the other woman. Fine, I'm going home to get some sleep. Call me if anything happens. Barry waved to Bet and raced off in a flash of lightning. Seriously, she is just too cute for her own good, Bet chuckled. Dr. Wells nodded to himself. Well, you're not wrong. Barry made it back to her apartment in record time. She stopped running in an alley near her building and casually trotted out onto the sidewalk. She made her way up to her apartment, stopping only to check the mail. Nothing special, just bills. She went to unlock her door when her neighbor, an older lady who lived alone with her cat, poked her head out of the door. "Oh, Barry, good you're home," the older lady said with a grin. Barry smiled. She always liked Mrs. Price. She was a sweet old widow who knitted the whole floor Christmas scarves and occasionally brought Barry cookies. "Hey, Mrs. Price. Just getting back from work. How's Gidget?" Barry asked, spotting the fluffy white cat wind around her neighbor's legs. Mrs. Price smiled. "She's doing wonderfully. But I have something for you, sweetheart," the older woman said, turning back into her apartment. Barry grinned, expecting a platter of cookies as usual. But instead, Mrs. Price struggled under the weight of an enormous bouquet of ice blue roses. Barry rushed forward to help her. There had to be 3 dozen artfully arranged with baby's breath and Queen Anne's lace. Barry stared. "A nice young man dropped these off for you earlier. Such a sweetheart. He also dropped off this box of chocolates and a present for you. Can't help but wonder what he did wrong," Mrs. Price explained. Well, derailing that commuter train for a starter, but Barry couldn't tell Mrs. Price that. The sweet old lady would have an aneurysm if she knew that Barry had dated a supervillain. Barry forced a smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Price, but could you do me a favor?" "Anything, Barry, dear," she said, handing over the flowers. Barry frowned into the bouquet in her arms. "If you see him again, around here, call me, day or night, if I'm home or not," Barry insisted. Mrs. Price nodded and smiled, helping Barry carry the presents into her apartment. She fussed over Barry's mess and health for a little bit before she left. Barry closed the door behind her and slid down it so she was sitting on the floor. The small package was still in her hand, ice blue wrapping giving away who it was from. Her hands shook as she thought about calling Cisco and Caitlin. She shook her head. This was her problem. She was an adult. She could handle this. The box was a little bigger than her hand, and light. Her fingers trembled a little as she carefully unwrapped the box. Inside was a folded note. She took it out and unfolded it. "Dear Barry, I'm sorry. You should know that I never meant to hurt you. I had no idea you worked at the CCPD. I never meant to use you. Of that much you can be sure. I also never meant for you to find out the way you did. I honestly don't know if I ever intended for you to find out. But the fact stands that you did. I sent you this to tell you that I will not be using you against anyone, including yourself. This is the last time I will contact you without your permission. I don't like civilian casualties, and I will not have you being one of mine. Lisa has agreed to the same terms. I'm sorry. CC." The signature confused her for a second, but then she remembered Cisco calling him Captain Cold at the train tracks. She snorted, but there wasn't much humor in it. She couldn't believe he actually liked Cisco's dorky nickname for him. She looked down into the box, and her frown deepened. There was a simple gold locket laying inside on a white cloth. It had a snowflake engraved on it. It was jagged and intricate, truly beautiful. A single sapphire was pressed into the center of the snowflake. She flipped it over and shook her head. Her initials were carved onto the back. The inside was empty, but there was a note underneath. "Don't worry, I bought it. The chocolates, too." That made Barry laugh. Then she shook her head and stood, walking over to the box of chocolates. They were exceedingly fancy. Barry sighed and sat down in front of the bouquet of flowers. It was going to be very hard not to think of Len now. She growled in frustration and went to change into her pajamas.